1. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, when we go to a certain museum and people who create art are able to do things like get a banana, put duct tape and stick it against an empty white canvas, call that art, and sell that for a couple of $1,000,000, makes me rather suspicious. Ladies and gentlemen, the subjectivity of the value of art in and of itself is exactly the point in which we have the most risk, and this becomes a systemic, singular point of failure because of the lack of fetters and control that make it particularly difficult to be able to take that industry seriously and also be able to partake in that industry as a creator or an artist or as a collector wanting to buy art. The problem we see proliferate in status quo are nefarious political elites and socialites who use their levers of power to launder money by funneling them into tax havens like the Cayman Islands and Swiss bank accounts, when they're literally able to use art as a conduit to clean that dirty money. The intuition pump here is simple. It's like those gangster mobster guys who like kill people and stuff, and then you wonder how come they have this front end looking pizza shop and stuff. That's exactly how you're able to launder the placements of money that you actually steal or get from corruption, clean it, quote unquote, through that legitimate business, and get it on the other side. That is exactly what motivates our side of the house. A few key points of framing which we think are relevant for this debate. Number 1, this is an actor motion, and we need to be able to examine who the artistic community is and what exactly their interest is. We think the artistic community is primarily consisting those who are creating art or artists and those particular people who are buying art like customers and collectors. And also, of course, society who doesn't have enough money or motivation to buy or make art, people who enjoy it. Number 2, what do we mean by control of transactions? We think that the artistic community is going to actually regulate themselves. Let me mech this out. I understand it's an actor motion, but for us to have the best possible debate, I need to be able to give you a mech of sorts in terms of how it's going to work. We are going to create DORA, the Department of Regulating Art, and DORA is going to be able to do a couple of things which include but are not limited to: A, dynamic and adjustable price floors and ceilings to be able to protect the prices of art. Meaning, there's going to be a band wherein it can't go too low, it can't go too high, and they're going to be able to dictate that through complex algorithms that take into account supply and demand, and also the average price that the art is actually being bid for, juxtaposed against what the artist is willing to sell for. Similar to how they're able to regulate stocks and status quo. B, we're going to have more stringent KYC or know your customer processes in order to be able to make sure that we know who's actually buying art and we know who's actually selling art. This becomes an advanced form of verification, wherein sure, we're willing to bite the bullet that it increases the bureaucratic capacity, but we think that's important. C, what do we mean by advocate stricter control of this? It can happen in hard and soft ways, right? Hard ways, wherein we're literally going to go out in the streets and be able to clamor for the protection of the people creating art and those people buying it, or soft ways like being able to vote or select people who are head of galleries and head of the movement to be able to fight for those particular things. D, lastly, right? What do we mean by art? Every kind of art. I think this probably might apply a bit more to tangible art, but I'm willing to be able to bite the burden for things like NFTs and digital art, especially since a lot of scams and a lot of money laundering does happen with cryptocurrency through these art, like what we saw during the last NFT cycle, where so many people got stolen their hard-earned money because of these scams. What is my case, right? We're basically going to argue that absent advocating for stricter controls, you run the risk of bad things particularly happening. The first thing that I want to explain is that the subjectivity of art price in and of itself is exactly what creates the loophole for laundering. The same way these Italian mobster guys are able to put that particular meatball pizza calzone shop, the same way people are able to leverage on that subjectivity, like what I mentioned in my pre-oration. That in and of itself has a harm of literally getting the money that was literally taken from people out of theft or out of plunder, or even in instances of negligence, actually being able to be cleansed and money laundered to be able to oppress people. These people are able to hire private armies, they're able to buy drugs and other kinds of things that can corrupt society, and they do it particularly through this perverse incentive structure that proliferates absent stronger forms of regulation. The second thing I'm going to say is that on both ends of the spectrum, people can be harmed. In instances where the art is too overpriced, for instance, because people subjectively are able to price it so high, even if you don't get too much value, the customer gets the short end of the stick, and over time, when they try to sell it, for instance, in the secondary market, wala na, no more, it doesn't work. What they bought, let's say, for 100%, 5-10 years later, prices crash because of a lack of control, and it becomes what, 10 or 20% at best of its original value. They get wrecked and art gets diminished. On the other hand of the spectrum, if these art are lowballed or undervalued, artists themselves who become labeled starving artists are the ones who get the shorter end of the stick. And we think through our policy and the idea of being able to push for this as the community, we're able to do things like getter protection and intellectual property laws, and also legal ramifications to be able to hold particular people accountable. Absent a handbook or absent any form of framework, we're left to the subjectivity of the law, wherein lawyers are able to protect these particular people who have the means and capacity to be able to do it. Ladies and gentlemen, being able to have more bureaucracy is ultimately an important way in order to protect the marketplace and ensure that things are done smoothly, fairly, at good prices. We are very proud to stand on side proposition and open this debate.